it's pretty unprecedented change happening right now.
There's lots of testing and trialing and investigation.
It's just become a tool for them. It's not replaced their artistic process, it's augmented and helped them.
That freedom right now is an incredibly important thing for the next generation.
If the student thinks that's the end product, then we do have a problem.
There's a big question in the air, like, will any of these jobs still exist?
The unique selling point of many large visual effects and CG studios is the quality of their internal engineering.
Welcome to Beyond the Frames, the podcast about making movies, TV series, animation, VFX, and all that kind of stuff. I'm here today at Escape Studios with Jamie from NVIDIA and Mark from Escape Studios. We're going to be talking about Gen AI, OpenUSD, and some of the exciting advances in the industry, not just for professionals, but people looking to train to work in the industry too. So Jamie, before we get into Gen AI, because obviously that's going to be like the biggest topic for us today, tell us a little bit about what you do at NVIDIA.
Cheers, Rafi. I look after the media industries at NVIDIA for the EMEA, generally European region. So entailed in that is working with both major end users of NVIDIA technology across multiple industry verticals within the media space. So our visual effects companies, the broadcast agencies and marketing world. And then within that ecosystem, we have a huge number of partners who build products and services on top of NVIDIA technologies. So we work with both ends of the community from a developer perspective, as well as an implementation and user perspective to make sure that we're guiding our developer partners on the tools that the end users want to use and making sure that we accelerate all of these areas of the industry at the same time.
That's great. So it's a focus on the commercial aspects of some of the technologies that can then serve these people working in this space, right?
Yeah, commercial aspects, but also helping the very foundations of ecosystem grow as well, which is why, we're always very supportive of the academic space as well. So we include that area in what we call ecosystem. So universities and colleges, like our friends at Escape Studios, and how they build the next generations of developers and artists that will use NVIDIA technologies.
Perfect. So that next generation then, Mark, Escape Studios, in my mind, as someone who's worked in the industry for a couple of decades, Escape is that iconic place where you think of when you think, I need to upskill or train myself in something that's either emerging in the industry or a shortfall that you find in your own skill set. So tell me a little bit about what you've been doing at Escape.
Thank you, Rafi. But I'm head of industry engagement and industry training at Escape, and of course developer. So my role at Escape is to help develop the content on the courses, but also to engage with our industry partners. As you mentioned, we've been around for over 20 years, servicing the visual effects industry, particularly in games and animation. And not only do we sort of train students to work directly in the industry, we also provide undergraduate and postgraduate programs, but we also provide training programs for industry themselves. So they'll approach us for sort of new and emerging technologies, and we'll try and interface with them and provide training programs for their staff, as well as obviously the students and the undergrads that are going to be their future employees. So it's a really good position to be in, understanding from both sides their needs and requirement and the directions that industry needs training or education to go into.
Yeah, cool. Like industry readiness is always something that I think about when I think of Escape, like in some of the teams that I've worked with before, when we've sent people to Escape or we've hired people that have come out of Escape training, there's one thing that you can be sure of time and time again, is that industry readiness. There's a situation we have right now where I know we always talk about, stuff's changing all the time, the industry's constantly moving, but it's pretty unprecedented change happening right now, not just in Gen AI, but when we get into USD as a platform, as a format, and what that means for the industry. What kind of trends are you seeing right now, the pull from the industry? Because that's kind of what Escape is driven by, right? Like the industry needs.
Absolutely. I mean, we are driven directly by industry, what they want artists to know in the next year or two, all those skills is what we try and provide. Interestingly, it seems a bit of a grey area at this point in time, because I think a lot of facilities themselves are still trying to get their head around what this technology means for their process. Yeah. One thing's for sure is jobs will evolve. I won't say get lost, I will say evolve. I mean, it reminds me of what happened nearly over 20 years ago in the film industry with the advent of digital, when people moved from analog to digital, from film to the computers. Again, it was the same scary thing. It was obvious a lot of techniques were going to become obsolete or at least translate into something different. And people were able to develop skills and move with that and survive quite happily with it, which was the exciting thing.
Yeah, I remember studying film just before that transition. And my lecturers, I was really lucky, I was taught by alumni from the Monty Python crew. They taught at Panico Films, which was still teaching analog techniques, but we were just at the cusp of turning digital. And there was a big question in the air, and like, will any of these jobs still exist? But actually what turned out to be the case is your skills were transferable.
Absolutely.
If you're a cinematographer in the analog space, totally translated to not only digital cinema, but down the line, real-time engines as Unreal Engine now, for example, or even Omniverse, where the way you handle a camera in the real space totally translates to the digital space. Do you think that sort of transfer of skills is still is still happening with the onset of Gen AI?
Absolutely. I mean, the pipelines and the creative process has been, as you guys have just been saying, it's been an evolving process since it started, right? And I think the evolution of tools and capabilities especially in visual effects and CG is going to see a really interesting next step with these tools. If you look at the engineering requirements and capabilities that we have for advanced capabilities in this space already today, knowledge of Python, knowledge of machine learning, kind of already exists in many studios in the industry, and not just within visual effects now, but within lots of industrial and automotive 3D content creation groups. And I think the requirements that will grow around understanding how and where to implement new AI capabilities and new AI tools will develop at that technical end of the pipeline of an organization. I think it's absolutely correct what we were saying a minute ago, that lots of companies are still looking at how and where to best evolve those capabilities. There's lots of testing and trialing and investigation happening right now. But I think because these tools have accelerated so much in the last 12 months, we're going to see that need to integrate new capabilities at production level a lot quicker than we might traditionally have seen that happen. Because we're seeing it in other industries outside of traditional visual effects and film already.
What kind of industries? Is it like the manufacturing, automobile kind of industry?
I think anywhere where there's a huge amount of language data, we're seeing the use of large language models being integrated very quickly to increase efficiencies, increase productivity across lots of different business areas. We're seeing this in financial services, we're seeing this in the automotive industries, we're seeing this in lots of areas. I think one of the the more difficult parts of content creation from a 3D point of view is that it requires a lot of expertise and a lot of data to do things like generate 3D objects at a very high quality. We've done a huge amount of work in this space already, partnering with people like Shutterstock and Turbo Squared. But there's some way to go in that area, which is why right now it's a lot about ideation and the thought process for content creators and studios as to where do we best use this today, and where's it going. Let's understand and map this out so we know when and where to increase our focus on certain areas. And a lot of that comes down to a tight integration with research, a tight integration with the technology companies that are building these tools. Like, traditionally we've looked at, events like SIGGRAPH to see what's happening. And I think this year, more than many, there was a huge amount of research in this space that was presented both by NVIDIA as well as, the researchers from major studios, as well as people like Google and other, large tech companies. And I think we're going to see that getting inserted into applications and end user capabilities quite quickly.
Yeah. As a creative, I'm fully aware that there's this tidal wave of AI change happening. And it can be kind of overwhelming where every week there's some new piece of kit, from everything from someone tweeting their own exploration through to another mid-journey type thing popping up to major announcements from NVIDIA and SIGGRAPH. It can be hard to know where to begin. And even if you start on something, to try and keep up with the change in that space is kind of overwhelming. One thing that I found quite helpful is you guys at NVIDIA recently released or announced the release of something called AI Workbench, which from what I can understand, AI Workbench is a user-friendly front end for a lot of large language models that are out there that, unless you're a Python programmer, it's kind of hard. It's a steep learning curve for you to combine into something that's usable for your use case. Whereas AI Workbench is a front end for a lot of those, brings them together so the entry point is a lot easier into that in that space.
Yeah, I think something that we always recognize is as these capabilities grow, and as you say, right, as people see these things and they want to get involved in them, we know that there is a huge complexity behind a lot of those tools. Massive. That you've seen, right? And in order to get people accelerated in their journey in whether it's generative AI or whether it's any form of AI research, one of our goals at NVIDIA has always been to bring together frameworks which are a combination of many tools that you need to figure out before you even start.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the dependencies when you're running an AI application or a training job, there are many, many different parts to that all need to work in collaboration for that process to be efficient and not have to go back and forth on different versions of PyTorch and inference tools and drivers and runtime engines and operating systems. So AI Workbench, as well as what we have in our NGC, NVIDIA GPU Cloud, which is a collection of containers, aims to allow developers to shortcut that process to start bringing together their data with maybe a pre-trained model and create things quicker and easier. Yeah. And that's a process that we put into many of the frameworks and tools that we release. And AI Workbench is another evolution of that allows people to bring that from the large scale where we've been doing that before into workstations, into laptops. Our friends at Scan make some amazing AI focused systems that people can run under the desk at home. So being able to create that framework that will run on a workstation, but also then allow you to take that work and move it into the cloud or into a much larger AI training system, gets people on that journey quicker. It's one of those things that we always try and encourage in our teams is, if you've done something that looks like it's really complex and we want to try and, enable people to replicate that sort of work, let's try and make it as simple as possible for people to get there.
So I've got a workstation at home, like a production workstation. It's got an A6000 GPU. So that's fine I could run that AI Workbench on that. But if I wanted, would I go to the cloud for more power? Is that what it is? Or just if I'm on the go?
Yeah, I mean, it allows you to,
if I'm on set, for example?
The idea of the way that we architect AI frameworks is that we want you to be able to run those things anywhere that you want to, right? Wherever the right scale is, wherever the right economics are for you. So if you want to start on that workstation, you find something where you need a huge amount of scale and it makes sense for you to go to a cloud provider, that you can connect that cloud provider's compute capability with your credentials, whatever it is, and move the same software stack that you develop locally into that cloud. And that conversely could also be, an on-premise solution. It could be a partner solution, right? You could be taking that into a studio or somewhere you're collaborating with, and they already have a compute platform. So you can move that work from your workstation to that platform easily.
That's the use case I can totally see when I'm with my clients. If I've been working on something on my workstation at home, it's one thing to show them the results, like the generated images or video. But it's another thing to, you show them the results and then work with them on site with them, because they can't always come to my studio. Or even if you're on set and you want to generate something. But let me take it back to someone who's entering the industry or a student today. Mark, if they come up to you and they show you their portfolio and it's a bunch of Gen AI images, right now, how do you approach that?
To be fair, we're not that bothered really. I mean, we teach from the ground up. Our undergrad and postgrad programs teach students from having absolutely no knowledge on the course, and they're the ones we're particularly interested in the portfolios. The short courses anybody can apply for. And we do find some undergrads applications are coming in with generative AI stuff, which is absolutely fine. For us, we're looking for potential. We're looking for people that have an artistic sensibility. They have a bit of a vision and a direction. And what we tend to find is a lot of these kids, when you look at the gen stuff that they've created, there is a sense of progression there. You can get a feeling for the inner artist there. I don't suppose it really matters how they generate what's in their head. I mean, if they came with some random images they couldn't really explain, then obviously there's no real direction there. But if they came with, a bunch of collected images that they've generated, however, but there was a theme, a sense to it, then it's just become a tool for them. It's not replaced their artistic process. It's augmented and helped them. And I think that's really good because it does democratize a lot of stuff, because you get a lot of children, a lot of people saying, I can't draw, I'm not artistic. And, artistic is not necessarily about being good at drawing. I mean, a rubbish drawing will still get your creative idea across. And something like Gen AI can really help them get over that hump, because then they've got something that does look good to show, although really that doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen directors pitch shows on scribbles, but there's enough to get the idea the potential over. Exactly, and that's what it's about.
And what makes a rubbish drawing is really, you're missing a lot of context, right? Because on set, when you're trying to convey an idea to someone, a crew member, it's stick figures that you're putting in. You're putting a box for a camera, an arrow, and a stick figure. But that's a powerful drawing because suddenly it's clarified to the whole crew exactly what needs to happen in the shot. So, that's a good drawing in that context.
Yeah, for us, it's an exciting creative tool. Exactly. If the student thinks that's the end product, then we do have a problem.
Yeah.
But generally, it's not. It's part of that process, which that excites us. I think the potential that's there.
So, what would drive you in curating the kind of AI tools you need to integrate into, say, the curriculum? Because earlier we were talking about there's just a myriad of stuff, and every week there's a whole bunch of other tools.
Yeah.
Is there a criteria, like if someone who's looking to get into this now? What criteria should they follow?
I mean, no, we don't. I mean, we're quite unique as universities go. We're quite agile and industry facing, as you said, and we're very flexible. We don't have a problem with students using any of these tools throughout their modules. We're not teaching them officially because we teach the skills that industry are demanding. And then, as I mentioned, industry are not entirely sure what skills they quite need at this point in time. That could change in 6 months, and then we will start integrating it into the undergrad and postgrad programs. The one things, so what we are finding is they are using generative AI quite a lot for the concept and design stage. So I do feel sorry a bit for some concept artists who might find themselves out of a bit of work, because, a lot of directors can actually visualize pretty close what their vision is at very high quality with this Gen AI stuff. The other stuff that we're finding very interesting, maybe in a more senior level towards the end, is how things like machine learning can actually speed up production. And that is something that we're going to take certainly seriously in the next couple of years on our MSc courses, where we're going to sort of introduce the ideas to the students to build training models. Because the thing that excites us most about that is how you can offload literally a lot of the processing time you would normally have in production to pre-production. So for people that don't know, machine learning is where you kind of use you build yourself a data model, you train the software to learn a particular thing, and then after that can do it almost in real time. So things, for example, a muscle system, you could generate, you'd have to train it for several thousand hours on what muscle systems do and how deformation should look. But after that, you have a real-time tool where you can animate the jiggles and everything. And that's, like you say, it's perfect for a client to sit over your shoulder without all the processing time. So, the excitement of what you can do in production, how you can interact with clients is a great thing. But the tools are literally, again, mentioned at SIGGRAPH, the tools are not quite in the software yet. They're coming in the next few releases that we will have these machine learning tools. So we will encourage the students to start to look into that stuff, but we're not officially going to put it into the curriculums until there's definitely more of a thing from industry. But it's definitely an exciting area that we really, I think everybody should push into if they're interested in that. Yeah, anything that saves time and money in industry and can show off to the clients is a wonderful thing for everyone.
And I think that freedom right now is an incredibly important thing for the next generation of people coming into creative industries to explore and learn these tools, because as we've all been through, right? None of us are relative spring chickens now, but we've all seen new generations of creatives and engineers and developers come through into industry, and again, not just in creative, but in other areas as well. And they have been able to pick up brand new concepts and technologies much quicker because they don't have a legacy of framing it around what they've been doing for 20, 30, 40 years. So giving that freedom now to the next generation of creatives, I mean, whatever does come into the curriculum, whatever studios and industry decide, right, this is what we're going to adopt in the next few years in this area, they'll be much more adept at picking it up because they've had that freedom to explore all of the amazing free tools that are available on the internet today. Some of the, the more, advanced students on the programming side will be picking up those tools and models available from us, from Hugging Face, from Meta, from these areas, and combining them into their own little 3D experiments, which will become the pipeline developer, concept of the future of how you bring these tools in. So that freedom's a great thing to hear.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because in the last revolution, people did do film for the same way for 20 odd years. And since the digital revolution, we've had mini revolutions every 2-3 years in this industry. So in order to keep up, as an artist, you have to be incredibly agile and learn the new tricks as they come on and ride that wave. And that's been that way since the 2000s when it did become all crazy digital. The one thing for sure, though, is that no matter how much it's evolved since the 60s filmmaking, there are still the core skills that are essential. And that is the storytelling, that is the framing, the cinematography, and having a good eye for the quality of the image, a good sense of weight for the motion. Those skills transcend any of these technological changes. And I think, giving the students that eye on what makes a good creative image will give them the upper hand in order that they can use whatever tool is available. Because, we're of the perception here at Escape, no tool is a bad tool. Whatever works and gets the job done is a good thing, and embrace change. We're the ones that have been driving it for the last 10 years. These students now are the ones that are going to be driving it in the next 10 years. Yeah. And to give them that, that excitement of, wow, what's the new toy? What can I do with this? Oh, look, I've now can speed that up or change it. That drive is what's going to keep this industry alive and has kept it alive so far. It's an exciting time.
I caught you nearly saying children, stopping yourself from saying children a couple of times. So the spring chicken thing, I think, is more in that direction.
The thing is, I mean, it's not necessarily the wrong word to use because there are so many children using these tools. The democratization of...
Since Fortnite. Yeah. Fortnite was what brought them all into it.
And with the Fortnite, what's that thing called? The game creator.
Well, you've got Unreal for Fortnite.
Unreal 4, that's it, yeah.
So you can make your own levels in. So that's really...
But that's a brilliant stroke, right? Because you're spending so much time playing that game, and now you can make stuff in that game. It's a great gateway.
I mean, Minecraft levered them into it. The slightly older graduates that we get in, Minecraft was the thing that they got into most to build their virtual worlds, and then they wanted to build virtual stuff, got into Blender, then came to us, and then it was Unreal that got that excitement going.
Creativity isn't about working for a living, it's about playing for a living. So the fact that they combine play and make it fun to make stuff,
and the fact the tools were made free for them. Unreal made the tools free, and it democratized it. And the one thing I do find very difficult is learning paths. That's something I'm going to ask NVIDIA about particularly. I mean, we've got all these new wonderful technologies coming in and stuff. And that's something that we find difficult because we've got a lot of students that come and learn an awful lot on their own online, which is a wonderful thing. But the problem with most of the material online is unstructured. And unless you know what you want to learn, you can't really make that much sense of the learning materials. It's very much hit and miss a lot of the time, and their progress of learning is very slow because of that. Some get it right and go a lot quicker. So this is why they come to providers like us, because what we are able to do is structure that learning path for them so they can learn what they need to in the right order very quickly and then hit the ground running. And after that point, they can then go and learn from the stuff because they know what they're doing. And it's that kind of stuff, is that lack of guided learning materials. You find wonderful tutorials on how to do this, how to do that, how to do that, but none of the very simple overview. This is the overall framework. Let's break you into this gently and guide onwards,
And where it's relevant and why it matters to, the
Absolutely.
ultimate goal, which is working in a particular studio.
Older artists like myself that want to get into these industries, it takes me quite a lot of time to first of all, work out how the concepts should go together in what order. Once you've got that, then you can start looking at training materials around that and building up the bigger pipeline. But actually, that's the bit that needs addressing. Everyone puts out this wonderful content, but it's never that well structured for entry level or for a mid level.
Yeah, I think from an AI point of view, we've put a lot of effort into platforms like our Deep Learning Institute, but where we do provide, some structured, learning paths around AI, broadly speaking, and some specific use cases. But I think with generative AI and language models, it's moved from very complex, deep academic research into everyone's faces, the general public so quickly. It is difficult to figure out how to provide learning paths for people when fundamentally it is still very complex tools that are being built by NVIDIA, Meta, Google, Adobe, and many others. It's a difficult thing, but again, it comes down to the collaboration that we love to have with industry. So it's something that we should talk about. I think one area where we've had a lot of focus in that structured learning path, which is still very complex, but maybe not quite complex as building, a large language model, is around USD. Because, that's an area that has grown in interest and popularity and being front and center of, one of the next evolutions of 3D. We've put a huge amount of work into our own sort of developer portals and learning paths for that, because again, it's a complex thing that takes time for creatives and developers to pick up and learn. Maybe we can start integrating some of the AI stuff into what we're doing there. But I think, USD is one of those things that requires that learning path for the industry.
I'm so pleased you brought up USD, because USD marks a real turning point in my development as a creative. So a few years ago, I left Universal, where I'd been developing shows, writing and directing, live action and animation stuff, developing as in story development, VR experiences. And my hands-on knowledge of the CG animation process was fairly rudimentary. I was trained in Animation Mentor, but a very small element of Maya animation. So I just knew how to animate my characters and get a performance out of it. And in doing that, I realized I was more of a storyteller than a hands-on animator. But my technical knowledge didn't go much further than that. That was back in 2005. But when I left Universal after directing crews who were much more knowledgeable on this stuff, I realized that maybe I need to upskill a little bit, learn more about the hands-on elements of the CG production pipeline so I can communicate better with my crews. And at that moment just happened to coincide with the beta release of Omniverse from NVIDIA. And Omniverse for me, I was just exploring all the tools out there, and it made USD so accessible for me. Not only did it help me understand the emerging CG pipeline, the paradigm shift to real time better, I realized that I could create visuals on my own, far better visuals on my own than I could previously, because it greased the wheels between lots of other applications that would otherwise be too cumbersome when you've got to export files and get them all talking to each other well. So that the element of USD points to an opportunity to do away with legacy systems like file systems that have existed for a long time, or ways of working in the pipeline. There is a little bit of a painful process, because to get rid of legacy systems means training a lot of your crew. It means potentially stopping production so you can build a new pipeline, or you have a second team that builds the pipeline in parallel, and that's extra cost. So how do we navigate this? Because the advantages of USD are really clear to me. It's enabled me as an indie creator to be able to create an animated show all on my own that looks, relatively speaking, very high end, that I would not have been able to do with my skill set where it was with any other format or platform, because it takes away the technical barrier for me. And I'm sure it does for many other independent creators, and it will do for studios. So how do we transition, right? You've got 30 plus years of the way we've been making CG with FBX and proprietary systems and all of that. And now USD comes along and says, here's a way of creating something where all your apps talk in real time, and you can preview your final rendered images in a near final form much earlier in the process, and all the promises of real time and virtual production, all that sort of stuff. But it's a single file format that's also a platform that has other benefits like layers and history built in, and this open format. So how do we transition to that? Because the benefits seem quite clear to me.
I think the adoption curve is accelerating, but it's not an overnight transformation, right? Because people have been building 3D worlds for so long in multiple industries. To move to a new way of interchange and collaboration is something that's exciting, but needs to be well thought out. And that requires not just, one platform from NVIDIA in what we've done with Omniverse, which, we bet that USD was going to be the way to build a tool set and a platform like Omniverse for developers. But it requires, the industry of 3D tool developers and the industry of creators to realize those benefits that you outlined at multiple scales and for multiple use cases, right? We see USD affecting many industries already, manufacturing, automotive, retail, because content is created in many different industries, right? It's not just visual effects and CG where there is a very complex requirement for 3D and virtual worlds.
And accurate, right?
Physically accurate, right?
Yeah.
And that's
for us, keeping within the frame, we can do whatever we want. There's so many examples of animation where if you look just outside the camera, the model's all distorted and things are out of place because all that matters is within the frame. But with manufacturing, it's got to be dead on.
Yeah, and so this is, we've spent the last, 4 or 5 years working hand in hand with Pixar to extend USD in new directions, such as having schemas for physics and schemas for rigid bodies and deformations and things that weren't there before because they weren't needed in Pixar's pipeline. And now, the most recent, major development in this world is the Alliance for OpenUSD that we announced just before SIGGRAPH, where, Pixar, Adobe, Apple, Autodesk, and NVIDIA have come together to accelerate the creation of open standards for USD and the ecosystems around USD. And that group's already been joined by people like Unity and Epic, who obviously, incredibly important in the evolution of 3D, as well as, people like IKEA, which really shows you, how much this is growing beyond, CG and visual effects. I think Apple and IKEA are two really key partners in that space. What Apple have announced this year around, spatial computing, which obviously, they have also bet on USD being a big driver of that. They've come out and said how important USD is to Vision OS. And what that tells us as where we support that ecosystem is if that's where a huge amount of the end result is going to be seen, then clearly, USD is going to become important for that whole pipeline. But I think, you mentioned earlier when we were talking that IKEA is one of the largest creators of 3D assets in the world, which speaks to that volume of 3D that happens outside of visual effects as well. So that ability to interchange not just between applications, as you mentioned, but between industries becomes really important and really interesting. And I think, where we're going now with the work at the Alliance of OpenUSD and, increased adoption across the visual effects industry is going to create this new ecosystem of tools that are going to be built on top of frameworks like what we've done with Omniverse, but also the work that people like Side Effects have been doing, and the work that Autodesk and Epic and Unity will be doing, and USD becoming this general capability for studios to interchange with each other, for artists to interchange with each other. But it will be a process, and I think I'd be surprised if we're not teaching it yet today in industry-driven courses like what you guys do. But I suspect that it will grow in a need in the near future.
Well, I don't think there's a studio around now that will complete a VFX for a film or even animation completely on their own, right? It's all collaborative. Quite often, most major films are split between several VFX houses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I could see USD certainly helping there. I mean, how do studios now exchange data? I mean, what's the best practice now?
There's lots of studios and they all do it in a very specific way, and they all have, for the big companies, they've got very monolithic pipelines that they've spent millions developing over the last however long. And as you quite rightly mentioned before, to change that pipeline is an incredibly expensive, time-consuming process, which
hard to justify.
A lot of them have started to investigate. A lot of them are much further developed than others. Some have completely gone that way, and there's a whole mix in between. I think everybody knows it's inevitable, really, to have a shared format. I mean, the big advantage is that these days we're not just outputting using these assets for movies, we're using these assets for games, we're using these assets for real real-time experiences, that kind of thing. Previously, we would actually have different departments and rebuild that 3 times over, which is craziness.
Yeah.
The advantage of USD is you build the one asset, and that can be used for very many different industries at the same time. You know, Framestore do a lot of real-time stuff and stuff in the movies, etc. I can imagine them being quite happy with something like USD. As I say, they develop the one asset and then they can farm it off to whatever output medium they want to do that with. And then you can, like you say, you can share that with other studios. When you make an update that's live in a controlled way, you can send that update amongst all the people that are working from that. So you can guarantee that people are in cahoots with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think everybody can see the benefit of that. I think smaller facilities are a bit more wary of it because with the wonderful Omniverse, you do have a framework that you can dive straight in. Anybody can download Omniverse and get started with USD right now and do that kind of thing. But for a production where you have more specific needs, that may not be so flexible unless you start employing coders or programmers to help you do that. And only companies of a particular size would want to invest going down that road, which is an interesting phase. I could see maybe in the future a bit more that it will be more accessible because a lot of the tools will be seamless for people to integrate with it on a much easier level. And then if they need the more advanced pipeline attributes of USD implemented for themselves, then that's the point at which they develop it, you know, or get coders in to do that stuff. Because there is a lot of coding needed and a lot of understanding to actually make the pipeline work for you if you're not using something like Omniverse.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sticking point for a lot of people because that's cost and time. And, you know, for small companies, especially at the moment with the little waves that we have in industry, is that, you know, they're not sure often where the next job is coming in. So to make that investment for a year is a big ask because they, you know, what jobs we're going to have in a year. You know, bigger facilities know they've got investment maybe for a year or 2 years and can, you know, take that risk to develop a new pipeline for themselves. For us as educators, it's an interesting one because, you know, where do we fit in for that? You know, we're obviously industry, there isn't one set of skills we can say this is the way it's done and that'll serve you for whatever company you work for. You know, what we've got to do is be fairly more agnostic on that. As we always are, we try and be as agnostic as we possibly can and teach what the raw skills are. So the raw skills are understanding what asset management is, why that's an advantage, what systems are out there. Some of our students actively use Omniverse now because it's easy, but we're not implementing it because we don't have the developers to develop a pipeline. And when we are in discussion with industry, when time's right, we may work with a partner to help develop a USD system in-house that's agnostic enough for the companies, but we're a way off from that yet. You know, Omniverse is the one that I would recommend my students to, if they want to dive into USD now and actually use it on their projects, Omniverse is the framework they should use. Either that or they delve into something like Houdini Solaris, because again, that isn't a wonderful USD authoring, but then that's integrated into Houdini. And you have to deal with the vanilla installs of other DCCs, which aren't, again, at this point in time, aren't that great, but the connectors through Omniverse fix all of that. They've written those bits for you, so you don't need to use the vanilla stuff, but it's coming. You know, it'd be nice to use the vanilla things, but
something we talked about earlier around how generative AI will create opportunities in the future. I think USD is another example of that, where, you know, as the adoption goes up, the requirement for some of those roles, you know, will become as standard as a pipeline, you know, team or pipeline TD, or even just, you know, entry-level programmers in every size of studio. Which again, it's, you know, it's evolution of skill sets, as evolution of the roles required in the industry, and an understanding of USDs is going to be a fundamental one, whether you're in a CG studio or whether you're in an automotive, you know, company, or whether you're in, you know, a retail or CPG visualization team. But tying the two things together, if I can neatly with a little bow, one of the things that we brought out at SIGGRAPH was Chat USD. Which, you know, because we recognize that USD is a complex thing to get into. So by training a language model on all of the documentation there is for USD and a huge amount of the examples of the programming for USD, you know, someone can now sit down with that Chat USD language model and ask it how to do things in USD, ask it to write code in USD. So we can shortcut quite a lot of that learning by enabling, you know, to accelerate these
like an assistant, like a private tutor or assistant.
That's the word I was looking for. An assistant USD.
Yeah. Your own little Yoda guiding you through your USD
How
journey.
reliable are these language models? Because I've used ChatGPT for coding, for asking coding questions, and it's a bit dumb. It gets things quite fundamental things wrong.
Well, I think it
You
depends.
need to have quite a good understanding to know if it's what it's telling you is the truth or not. I wouldn't take it for face value.
Well, I think with custom language models that are fine-tuned on a very specific, well-curated data set, you can, expect a very good level of accuracy, because you've decided on what you want that particular AI model to be very, very good at. You've created a very niche use
I think a lot
case
of people
for it.
assume these things are 100% accurate. I mean, I know lots of people that use ChatGPT and just think it's the truth.
Yeah, and
I
I think
realize there's a big error margin to it all.
I think the very large open language models, they're amazingly powerful, and people should absolutely use them when they can, when they work for the outcome that you're after. But we couldn't have done something like ChatUSD with one of the very large open platforms, because you have to take what is a relatively niche data set, and a data set that's constantly evolving around the language of USD, and fine tune a model just with that within a team of researchers and AI developers. But I think that is something we're also going to see more common in general in visual effects. So these niche requirements. I've been doing a lot of work recently with a studio called Luxor Turner, which is work as part of a digital catapult project funded by the government. And they've been exploring how to create some of these sort of niche generative AI tools for things like depth maps and height maps. Mm-hmm. It's a very specific use case, and they have a very specific data set that allows them to go and build on top of an existing foundational model to create something that does a very particular job very, very well. And that's what I think we're going to see evolving. And that's, one of the other reasons that we created that ChatUSD tool was to give a good example of that. Mm-hmm. How, and those niche use cases can be accelerated very quickly. Yeah. Applying a single large monolithic language model to niche requirements within a specific industry is never going to result in 100%, all the time. I think, AI, you could never right now today put your hand on your heart and say it's going to be 100% all the time.
But the efficacy of like a Google search or Wikipedia is also not 100%. It's close, but it's not 100%. And that's not even generative. That's just curated by human beings. I can foresee say a studio that's been, I won't name any, but say a studio that's been around 100 years, that has a strong legacy of 2D animated films, but has found that maybe animating 2D films isn't that cost effective, and but has this rich library of artwork. They could create their own dedicated language. Would you call it language model? Language library?
Training model.
Training model. Yeah. Training model just on that data, and then it comes out with a fabulous in betweener that empowers 2D artists to do great in betweens.
Already doing that.
That maybe this hypothetical studio may already be doing
probably be already doing something.
But then you can imagine 10, 20 years from now, it's commonplace to have your concept artist supported by, probably not even 10, 20 years, but it would be commonplace to have a concept artist supporting machine that just does that in that style for that company. And it's hugely beneficial. And it's very narrow, but they'll be so commonplace that you would have it for almost anything, even on your, as you go about your day, you'd have your favorite recipes or something, your favorite ingredients. Give me a brand new recipe or something.
Yeah, I think we'll find large studios building their own internal tool sets and capabilities, because that's what they've been doing for a long time. It's the unique selling point of many large visual effects and CG studios is the quality of their internal engineering, and they will take AI on as another, arrow in the quiver to deliver those things. I think what we'll also see are the traditional large software vendors, your Adobes, your Blackmagics, your Side Effects, your Autodesks, building tools that they integrate more and more into their applications, and they've been doing this for a long time, right? We've had machine learning and AI assisted capabilities in these apps for years. People haven't really realized it because they've seen a color matching tool or a match move tool that all of a sudden is very, very fast and very, very accurate. No one's really thought about the fact that that is machine learning or AI in the background because it hasn't been a front and center conversation piece.
Until recently, yeah.
Like content aware fill in Photoshop, when that showed up, I was like, yes, this is great. I don't have to spend hours doing this painful task. But where was it going to go? It was going to head towards where we are now with Midjourney and beyond. But even taking it simpler, a simpler example, autocomplete is an earlier version of what we're talking about here, right? A computer with statistics and probability narrowing the options down for you before you can type your sentence to speed up your work. Is that not an earlier form of what we're talking about now?
It's predicting what you want next.
I mean, computers have always been there to make our productivity, not necessarily your life easier, but your productivity to increase. And that's what these tools have always been there. I don't think they're going to replace us, as people are worried about. But again, they're going to make us more productive in different ways and in different pipelines that we can't even imagine at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is the last time, like I said, the film revolution, when it moved digital, was nobody knew what they were doing for about 5 to 10 years because it was all changing so much. The best we could do was make sure we had our base skills and just live with those and try and implement what was coming. After about 5 years, suddenly we had pipelines, and then we had very specific job descriptions based on those new pipelines that got developed. And that's where we are today. And I think the same with the AI stuff. All they can really ask for at this point in time is agile people that have enough knowledge to do stuff with it, because it's now that we're actually writing those pipelines. In 2 or 3 years' time, those pipelines will be much more defined, and you will have very specific jobs for very specific roles.
Yeah.
But that hodgepodge, the boiling pot of what it is at the moment, is the exciting time, I think.
We got a glimpse into some of those pipelines, what those pipelines could be very soon. There was something at SIGGRAPH called, I think it was called text to texture, or something like that, where you could grab a 3D object in a scene, say it's like a rug or something, and you wanted a different pattern. It's not that you were just dragging a texture or a material from a library that existed. You typed in the description of what you were looking for, and it would generate, like, you wanted a woolly rug as opposed to like a,
I mean, we've got that in Houdini now. There's some independent developers have developed a thing called MLOps in Houdini, machine learning operators. Some incredibly clever guys. And they were just demoing it, in fact, at SIGGRAPH, a really nice tool where you've got a 3D model in there, and they unwrap it, send off those into Stable Diffusion, which is the free version, and then they bring back basically the texture for the horse. You ask, we can have a horse with red hair, and then you get real textured 3D model.
Yeah.
I mean, that's there now. They can do crazy stuff with segment anything as well. You can sort of pull out almost real-time roto, get your image in there, segment it up. And that's it. It's literally done in 2 seconds. You've got a roto mat, or you can use that to generate other geometry from images. Yeah, I mean, these tools are there now. People have developed them and put them in the DCCs.
And if this stuff gets you to 90% of the results in minutes or seconds, I guess the opportunity there is to focus more on the storytelling or the point of the shot or the image that you're making. That's exciting to me because I'm a showrunner. I develop IP. And going back to what you said about using USD to feed multiple pipelines or multiple formats. This idea of creating a transmedia show is commonplace in, companies who build franchises, right? Because they want their IP to hit multiple touch points.
Well, what's really cool is you don't have to worry about that at the beginning of production anymore. You can actually use USD and then go, actually, I now want to do this. And everything's, you don't have to redo anything, which is
what has been a bottleneck quite often is, it's going to be expensive because we're going to have to recreate assets. We're going to have to speak to a gaming company about how we do that. Let's just focus on the film and worry about that later. And then it never happens unless you're a giant. For an indie like me, I work in Unreal Engine. I use USD as my pipeline because Omniverse is the sort of the backbone. It makes USD easier for me to understand, but also means Maya and Substance and Unreal all talk nicely together because of the nuclear server that Omniverse has. Now, there are other apps that you could use, but those are the only ones I really need to realize my animated show.
I think one of the important things with hardware is using the appropriate pieces of technology for your work. We put a huge amount of effort in to work with our partners who build GPUs into workstations or into cloud platforms to make sure that they are as fully supported and qualified and reliable as they can be. But you're absolutely right that, young creatives or game studios will use the appropriate cards, technology, workstations for their use cases. and higher end, studios or creatives that need, more memory buffer, more reliability or support from their partners like Scan and NVIDIA, will go to those, professional enterprise grade cards. And we do the same thing in our cloud services, where making compute accessible is a key driver for us. While we have tools and platforms like Omniverse Cloud and DGX Cloud, where we're making the move towards on-demand 3D tools more and more accessible. We're making the move towards on-demand AI services and capabilities more and more accessible. But ultimately, it comes down to building software and systems that you can run from a laptop up to those massive hyperscale platforms without having to do a huge amount of work in changing what you've built here when you want to run it at massive hyperscale.
Well, what's really exciting is whatever your inspiration, whatever you want to create, there's no better time to get into it, right? From free software to hardware that's available at every level, there's no excuses now. And that's a wonderful situation to be in if you're a creator. So thank you for joining us on Beyond the Frames. Hope you found it inspiring. I certainly did. And despite the pixels and algorithms and all the tech magic that we've been talking about, none of it means anything without you, the creator, the person behind it all. So stay inspired and just keep creating.